The sun was a hammer over the Dakota territory, and the town square was its anvil. And Eliza Harrow was the piece of iron being beaten into submission. She stood tied to the whipping post, her wrists already raw, her face streaked with dust and tears. Judge Renaer, a man whose heart was as hard as the prairie in winter, stood before her. The crowd pressed in close, hungry for the spectacle. "This woman has defied the law," Renaer's voice cut through the heat. 10 lashes will teach her pride its place." Some folks jeered, some whispered prayers. Sheriff Amos Pike stood off to the side, his badge feeling heavier than lead. Eliza's little boy, Tom, only 6 years old, clung to her skirts. His tiny fists were wrapped around a cracked leather strap. It was the strap from his father's Bible. His father, Samuel Harrow, had been a hero in this town. Now his widow was being treated like a criminal. "Mama, hold Papa's strap," the boy cried, his voice trembling. "Don't let go." Eliza's tears fell freely. "I have nothing left," she sobbed. Renaer sneered. "Then let the law take the rest." He raised his arm. The whip sliced through the hot air. The crowd gasped. The lash hissed toward her bare back. But before it struck, something impossible happened. A calf, white as new-fallen snow, walked into the middle of the square. It moved with a strange, calm purpose, its dark eyes seeming to see everything. The whip cracked, a sound like lightning splitting a dead tree. But it wasn't Eliza's back that took the blow. It was the white flank of the buffalo calf. The beast didn't flinch. It didn't cry out. Instead, it bent its legs and lowered itself to the ground, kneeling in the dust right in front of her. A wave of shock and awe rolled through the crowd. "The white calf!" a Lakota elder cried out from the edge of the square, his voice shaking. "It kneels for truth." Tom's eyes went wide. He pressed the Bible strap against his mother's wrists, as if binding her to the miracle. Sheriff Pike took a staggering step forward, his hand outstretched, his mind caught between the law he served and the heaven that had just answered. Judge Renaer's face was a mask of fury. "It's a trick," he snarled. "Some devil's beast." But no one was listening. All they could see was the widow, the judge, and the white buffalo calf kneeling in the dust between them, as if God himself had just stepped into the town square. For a long, breathless moment, the entire world seemed to hold still. The only sound was the buzzing of flies in the heat. The white buffalo calf knelt in the dust, a living shield between Eliza Harrow and the judge's whip. Then the silence shattered. "It's a miracle!" a woman screamed, falling to her knees. "Heaven sent it!" a ranch hand roared, his hat tumbling into the dirt. But just as quickly, the fear turned to anger for some. "It's trickery," a miner spat. "Just paint on a beast." Judge Renaer's face was the color of a fresh bruise. He shook the whip again, desperate to regain control. "This is no sign of God," he bellowed. "There is no law in this town but my law." His words were sharp, but they couldn't cut through the wave of awe and terror that was sweeping through the crowd. Sheriff Amos Pike stepped forward, his eyes locked on the calf. He'd seen 1,000 cattle in his life, but he'd never seen one so white. He'd never seen an animal that didn't flinch from pain. The calf rose slowly, calmly. It stepped to Eliza's side, its flank brushing against her, its gaze fixed on the judge. "You raised your lash to break me," Eliza's voice trembled. "But it is I who stands, and truth that has kneeled." Tom clutched the Bible strap tighter. "Papa sent it," his small voice rang out. "Papa's strap, Papa's truth. It saved Mama." The words hit the crowd harder than any whip. Every man there remembered Samuel Harrow, the man who had died saving this town from raiders. The men who had been shouting for punishment now looked at their own feet, their mouths suddenly dry. The Lakota elder lifted his staff. "The white calf kneels only when innocence is trampled," he cried, his voice like thunder. "And you have all seen it kneel." Sheriff Pike's chest felt tight. His mind was a battlefield. The law he had sworn to uphold on one side, and the miracle burning before his eyes on the other. Renaer slammed his whip against the platform railing. "A beast does not make law," he screamed. "My word does." But even as he raged, his eyes kept darting back to the pale animal beside the widow. And the tremor in his hand told everyone he no longer believed his own words. The square had turned against him, and no decree, no matter how loud, could turn it back. The air in the square grew thick and ugly. It was a storm of faith against fear, and it was tearing the town apart. Half the folks were on their knees, hands lifted in prayer. The other half were shouting curses, their fear disguised as scorn. "You'd call a beast holy?" A man with coal dust on his face barked. "It's just a trick." Eliza stood bound to the post, the world swirling around her. She whispered to Tom, who was still clinging to her, his small body a warm anchor in the chaos. "Hold it, son. Hold the strap fast. Your father's strength is in it." Tom's eyes, wide with a child's perfect faith, were fixed on the calf. It stood beside them, its breath slow and steady, as if it feared nothing on this earth. "It doesn't move, Mama," he whispered. "It's waiting." Sheriff Pike took another step forward, planting himself between the judge and the crowd. "Renaer," he said, his voice carrying over the rising noise, "you can call it trickery, but no whip of yours has ever stopped a crowd like this. They have seen it kneel. They have seen it shield her. Do you think your law is stronger than their eyes?" Renaer's face was a mask of hate. "The law is stronger than superstition," he spat, but his voice was drowned out by the Lakota elder. "The white calf has chosen," the old man cried. "Deny it, and you deny heaven's hand." The crowd was a wave, ready to crash. The sheriff's hand drifted to his badge, his heart a painful drum in his chest. He had taken an oath to keep order, but what good was order if it was built on a foundation of cruelty? Eliza lifted her head. Her voice was clear, though her body trembled. "If you strike me now, Judge, you strike more than a widow. You strike what kneels between us." For a moment, Renaer's eyes met the calm, dark gaze of the calf. His throat tightened. "It's only flesh," he rasped, "and flesh will bleed." He twitched the whip in his hand, but he didn't raise it. That one moment of hesitation sent a shiver through the crowd. They had never seen their judge waver before. Tom raised the Bible strap higher. "If you strike her," his child's voice broke through the noise, "you strike my father too." The crowd gasped. The memory of Samuel Harrow's sacrifice was a fresh wound in this town. The shouts turned to a single roar of confusion. They were a town torn between punishment and mercy, all of them trapped by the sight of a boy, a widow, and a white buffalo calf that refused to leave their side. And that's when Sheriff Pike knew this couldn't end here. Not in the dust. "Enough!" The sheriff's voice boomed across the square, a crack of thunder that momentarily silenced the storm. "This crowd will tear itself apart before another lash falls. If judgment must be made, it will be behind walls, not in the dirt." The declaration stunned the crowd into a fragile quiet. Judge Renaer's face went dark with fury. "Pike, you'll answer for this!" But the sheriff ignored him. He strode to the post, drew his knife, and with a single, decisive slash, he cut Eliza's bonds. The ropes fell away. A collective gasp swept through the square. Renaer roared with rage, but Pike was already guiding Eliza down the steps, with Tom pressed close, his small hand still clutching the Bible strap. The crowd parted before them, a sea of whispers and awe. As they walked toward the jailhouse, every eye strayed back to the white buffalo calf. It remained in the square, unmoving, its head lifted to the sun, as if it intended to stay until the truth was settled. Inside the sheriff's office, the air was heavy. Pike slammed the door and turned to face Renaer, who stormed in behind him, slamming his whip on the desk. "You shame this town," the judge spat. "You shame your oath. She hides a sin, and you cloak her in superstition." Pike met his glare without flinching. "And you'd cloak your cruelty with law. You think these people are blind? You saw it kneel. You heard the boy. That strap he clings to belonged to Samuel Harrow, a man who gave his life for this place. Will you lash his widow in front of his son and call that justice?" Eliza stood by the wall, weak but unbroken, her hand stroking Tom's hair. "My silence is not sin," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "It is dignity. And if you beat me, Judge, you will prove only that your law is afraid of the truth." Renaer's mouth twisted into a snarl. "At dawn, she will face the square again, and the lash will fall. No calf, no strap, and no child's tears will stop it. He stormed out, his black robe whipping the dust behind him. Pike sank into his chair, pressing his hands to his temples. For the first time in 20 years, the badge on his chest felt like a weight too heavy to bear. Through the window, he saw the pale shape of the white calf, still standing at the edge of town, steady and watchful. And the sheriff knew with a bone-deep certainty that no matter what happened, this town would never be the same. The reckoning was coming with the dawn. Night fell, but sleep did not. In the small jail cell, Eliza held her son, whispering stories of his father's bravery. Out in the main office, Sheriff Pike stared at his badge, the polished silver reflecting the flickering lantern light, in a single terrible question. Was he a lawman, or was he just the judge's dog on a leash? Young Tom couldn't sleep. The cracked Bible strap was looped around his wrist. He slipped out of his mother's arms, eased open the cell door, and crept out of the office. The sheriff saw him go, but said nothing. Some journeys have to be walked alone. The prairie was cool and wide under a canopy of silver stars. Tom's bare feet padded over the dark earth until he found them. Hoof prints pressed deep into the soil. They were heavy, round, and larger than any cow's. They seemed to glow in the moonlight. It was here, he whispered, his small hands tracing the edges. He lifted his eyes, and there, in the distance, were 2 points of light. The eyes of the white calf watching him, a calm, steady gaze that burned away his fear and left only a strange, fierce courage in his chest. He clutched the strap. "Don't leave us." His child's voice broke the silence. "Please don't leave. Mama needs you." A staff tapped the earth. The old Lakota elder stepped from the shadows. "The white calf walks when truth is strangled," he said, his voice like the wind. "It kneels when the heavens demand it. You carry your father's strap. You must also carry his courage." The elder knelt beside the boy, placing a weathered hand on his head. "Your father's blood bought this town its life. Do not let them sell his truth so cheap." From the shadows of the jailhouse Pike had followed, he saw the tracks. He saw the distant gleaming eyes. His hand went to his badge, and for the first time, it felt not like a symbol of authority, but of judgment. Tom stood, his face smudged with dirt, a new resolve in his eyes. "It's real," he whispered. "Mama will be safe." As the boy walked back to the jail, the prairie seemed to breathe a long, slow sigh. The hoof prints glowed faintly in the moonlight, proof etched into the earth. Pike lingered, staring out at the horizon where the calf had vanished, and he knew. He knew that when dawn came, no whip, no judge, no law written by man could stand against the truth that walked with them. Dawn broke fierce and golden, and the town bell tolled again. Every soul in Cedar Creek was drawn back to the square. Judge Renier was already on the platform, his face hard as iron, his whip coiled in his fist like a sleeping snake. "This circus ends today," he roared, his voice cracking. "No beast will rule this town. No child's tears will sway its law. She will be punished." The crowd seethed, a town at war with itself. Eliza was dragged forward, her head held high. Tom stumbled beside her, clinging to the Bible strap, his eyes blazing. Sheriff Pike mounted the platform, his steps heavy. "Renier," he said, his voice ringing out for all to hear. "I warn you, if you strike her now, you strike against truth itself." Renier turned on him. "You are sworn to uphold my word, Sheriff. Remember your place, or you will share her fate." Pike stood taller, his hand brushing the butt of his revolver. "My place is where justice stands," he said, "and justice is not in your whip." A gasp ripped through the square. The sheriff had just drawn a line in the dust. "He's right," a voice shouted from the crowd. "Samuel Harrow's blood bought this town. The calf kneels for her," another cried. "We saw it." The Lakota elder raised his staff. "The white calf comes again," he boomed. "It waits for the lash, and it will kneel." The crowd surged, neighbors shoving neighbors, fists raised. Renier slammed his whip on the railing. "This town belongs to law, not to omens," he screamed. But his hand was shaking. His eyes flicked to the edge of the prairie, and he froze. There it was, pale, steady, unmistakable. The white buffalo calf, closer than before, its hide gleaming in the sun, its gaze locked on the platform, A collective cry tore from the crowd. Some fell to their knees. Renaer snarled, "A beast is no judge!" But the lash in his hand quivered. Every person in that square knew his power was crumbling. Tom raised the strap high, his voice breaking with desperation. "If you strike Mama, you strike Papa too." The words were a hammer blow. The roar of the people drowned out the judge's fury. It was a tide that no man could turn back. By mid-morning, the square was a storm. Neighbors had become enemies. Voices clashed, shaking the very boards of the platform. Judge Renaer's face was slick with sweat, his eyes wild. "One lash," he spat, his voice raw. "One lash will silence this rabble and remind them who rules this town." Sheriff Pike planted himself in front of Eliza. "You strike her now, Renaer, and you'll break this town in half." Eliza swayed, but her eyes were fixed on her son. Tom pressed the Bible strap against her wrists. "Papa's here, Mama," he whispered. "Don't let them take you." Renaer's control finally snapped. "That strap, that beast, that boy's tears, none of it will change the law." He raised the whip high. The leather hissed in the air. 1,000 throats cried out. The Lakota elder's voice boomed above them all. "The white calf kneels where heaven commands, and heaven commands now." At his cry, the calf stepped through the fence. Dust billowed around its hooves. It walked toward the platform, its head low, its dark eyes fixed on the judge. The crowd fell back, a wave of screams and prayers. Pike's heart hammered against his ribs as the ground vibrated with the beast's steady, unhurried steps. Renaer's whip wavered. "This is my town," he roared, his voice breaking. "My law." He drew his arm back, the leather stretched taut. And in that single breathless moment, the whole world held still, waiting to see if a man's fury or heaven's will would claim the day. The whip tore downward, but before the leather could taste flesh, the white buffalo calf surged forward. It moved with an impossible grace, its pale body a flash of light between the woman and the lash. The whip cracked, a sound that should have drawn blood. But when the dust settled, the calf stood untouched, its dark eyes calm as night. Then before 1,000 witnesses it bent its legs. It lowered itself to the earth, kneeling in the dust at Eliza's feet, its great head bowed. The crowd broke. The jeers and shouts died, replaced by a wave of sobs. Men ripped the hats from their heads. Women fell to their knees. "It kneel!" the elder shouted, his voice thick with awe. "Heaven's hand is here. The calf kneels for the innocent." Tom's small cry was a blade in the sudden silence. "Papa sent it. Papa's truth." He wrapped the cracked Bible strap around his mother's wrists, pressing it tight, binding her to the miracle. Sheriff Pike stepped forward, his hand firm on Eliza's shoulder, his other raised to the crowd. "You see it with your own eye," he thundered. "No law written by man can strike what heaven itself now shields." Renaer staggered back, his face drained of blood, the whip falling from his limp hand. "It's a trick," he rasped, but his voice was a ghost. He tried to raise the whip again, but the calf didn't move. It just knelt there, a silent, immovable challenge. The judge's hands shook, and he looked small, shrunken. The crowd erupted, a single unified voice now. "Free her! Truth!" Pike drew a line between the widow and the judge, his voice sharp as steel. "You will lash no one today, Renaer, not while the white calf kneels in this dust." The whip clattered to the boards, and with it, the last of the judge's power crumbled into dust. Eliza's sobs broke into a storm of laughter and tears, her face buried in her son's hair. The entire square held its breath, as if waiting for heaven's final word. For a long moment, the world was still. The only movement was the steady rise and fall of the white calf's sides as it knelt in the dust, its great head bowed as if in prayer. Then slowly, with a calm that hushed every last whisper, it rose to its feet. It stood, its presence seeming to fill the entire square, its dark gaze sweeping over the crowd. Eliza sagged against the post, her son clutching the Bible strap in her hands. "Papa kept us safe, Mama," Tom whispered. "The calf showed it." Sheriff Pike stood firm, his voice carrying over the silence. "You have seen it with your own eyes. No whip, no decree, No judge can stand against what was shown here today. This woman walks free. The crowd erupted, not with anger, but with a wave of relief so profound it was a physical thing. Judge Renier stumbled back, his authority gone, scattered like dust in the wind. The Lakota elder raised his staff. "Remember this day," his voice rang out. "The white calf knelt in our dust, not for law, not for pride, but for truth. Remember, and you will walk as witnesses of mercy." The calf turned and walked through the parted crowd, each person stepping aside in silent reverence. At the edge of the square, it paused and looked back. Its gaze rested on Tom, who lifted the Bible strap high, his face still wet with tears, but his eyes shining. For a single heartbeat, the boy and the beast were connected. Then with a final snort, the calf turned and walked toward the prairie, its white hide gleaming until the sunlight swallowed it whole. Eliza sank to her knees, clutching her son, the strap looped between their hands. The crowd gathered closer, not with scorn, but with a quiet respect, some even kneeling beside them. Sheriff Pike took off his badge, polished it on his sleeve, and pinned it back on, his voice a soft vow. "From this day, no law will stand above truth in this town." The square breathed as one, a community forever changed, for all who had been there would carry the memory to their graves. The widow's tears, the boy's faith, and the white buffalo that knelt when all hope seemed lost. Sometimes the greatest truths aren't spoken in a courtroom, but are revealed in the dust of an ordinary day. What do you think? Was it a miracle, or was it something else? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe in stories where courage and faith win the day, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales from the heart of the West. Thanks for listening.